Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for having me along, or having me back rather. Here's a little summary of what I'm hoping to get through with you today. I've got about 45 minutes, I think. Last time when I spoke to Avrio, we had lots and lots of questions, and we ran out at the end for asking questions, and I think perhaps the question section was the most valuable. So I'm hoping to get through the talk in about 30 minutes or so, and then hopefully we can have a discussion at the end with any kind of things you've got in relation to the marketing of your firms in the future. So I'm going to begin with a reminder of what I spoke to you about when I came to see you in Malta. For those of you who can't remember or who weren't there, then we're going to look at some of the barriers to putting those practices into place. Then we're going to look at the future of legal marketing. I'm going to give you some tools and techniques for generating ideas for marketing your firms. And then finally, I'll end with some opportunities that you can perhaps use as members of Avrio. So as I mentioned, I last saw Avrio in Malta. Those of you there will remember the beautiful swimming pool and views from the hotel rooms. The gist of that presentation was about taking one piece of content which you perhaps produced in your CPD time, and then spreading that out through all different kinds of medium by chopping it up into smaller parts for social media, combining it together with the work of colleagues into books, doing it into blogs, that kind of thing. And we used the example of Top Gear, the quite famous UK car television series. We also looked at a law firm who was doing this, a small employment boutique who were doing a similar thing. So they were producing some blogs, they were chopping that up and using it on social media. They were syndicating their content out to magazines. They were hosting live events, breakfast meetings, networking events. They had print manuals highlighting key areas of employment law, and they were publishing things through their own website as well. At the end of the presentation, we talked about how this might work in the context of Avrio. So we thought that the Avrio website might potentially be a hub for which everybody could share their content into, and then by keeping track on on what all the other members were doing with their content, you could help to amplify the content of your colleagues in Avrio, and your messages would get out to a wider audience. Since then, we've built the website. I think when I was in Malta, we didn't have the website in progress yet. We've got the websites up, some of the news is there, and I know some of you are using it for that purpose, so that's good, and it would be really great if we could try and get some more engagement in that going forward. I think the value of it will definitely increase with the usage. So I think the feedback when we spoke about marketing last time was that it was a good idea. The way we were approaching it was a good idea, and that it was a useful, an efficient way of using your time. But still, many of us, myself included as a marketer, have barriers. Find that there are barriers in the way of putting the ideas into practice. So I'm going to just start by exploring some of those barriers. I think if we understand what the barriers are, then perhaps we can then move forward to try and resolve them. So firstly, I think this is a really popular one, particularly being too busy. Any of us who work in professions which are deadline driven, where we have clients constantly asking us to do things, everybody is too busy, and client work and that kind of thing always takes precedence over doing things which are perhaps more for the long term, or where you don't see the immediate results, or where you haven't got somebody breathing down your neck demanding for you to do something. So we can all understand being too busy. But the second part of that is the fear of growth. And I don't think we don't necessarily always acknowledge this consciously. But if you're a very busy person, sitting in a team of very busy people, sometimes the idea of doing a marketing campaign to create even more work for yourself, perhaps subconsciously or perhaps consciously, can be quite a frightening prospect. If you're sitting there already at total capacity, the idea of bringing in even more work and adding to your workload can be quite a daunting prospect. So we need to change the way we think about marketing and some of the benefits of marketing beyond just growth. If we don't necessarily want growth as in more work, we can look at things like the quality of the work as well. So being too busy and fear of growth is one really important barrier. The next one is, as lawyers and professionals, we're perhaps not used to selling ourselves. Perhaps we feel uncomfortable with selling ourselves or telling people what we do when they haven't asked for it. We perhaps feel rude or intrusive, or in particular with something like the law where we're dealing with perhaps quite personal issues. We don't want to be asking people about things unless they've invited us to talk to them. So that's another challenge that maybe we need to try and overcome when we're thinking about how we might market our firms. The third one, we've all got unique ways of doing things that which contribute to us building our businesses. And the idea of content marketing is to share some of your knowledge in order to help people understand what you do, and in the hope that they hire you. But you don't want to go too far and give away everything that you know so that they can take what you've told them and go away and do it for themselves. So there's a real fine line to be struck between being generous and showing what you can do and going too far and undermining your business. So we might be scared about that and worried about where to draw the line. And finally, if we get through all those challenges, perhaps as professionals who are used to being maybe process driven or risk averse, or many of those other sorts of things that can be that lawyers can be characterised by, is we might just face a creative block. We might carve out an hour of our time to sit down and write an interesting article, and then we just end up staring at a blank page, not quite sure what to write about. So this is the bit we're going to focus on towards the end of the talk. We're going to look at some tools and techniques that we could perhaps put in process, so that when we sit down to spend time on our marketing, we've got a process in place which we can follow to be able to get through the creative block. So my talk today is about the future of law firm marketing and how it can help you overcome some of those barriers. So the first one we looked at about fear of growth and being too busy. I think we just need to perhaps change our mindset towards thinking of marketing as a creator of opportunity. So what an ideal situation is that we sit in our firms and we have many more people coming to our door wanting our help than we have capacity to serve. On that basis, we can pick and choose the people who are going to be most professionally fulfilling, most profitable, most interesting to work with, and generally contribute to us having a better firm. Not necessarily more people, not necessarily more clients, but better quality of clients, more enjoyable clients, clients who have a better opportunity to refer work to our other colleagues and that kind of thing. So we don't necessarily need to think of marketing as being purely about growing the numbers of people who engage with the firm. To address the second point about being uncomfortable about selling, the future of marketing in law firms is not really about selling at all. It's about helping people, and by helping people, demonstrating your expertise and what you can do for them. It's creating goodwill before they've actually even instructed the firm. So I think if we can develop a mindset of helping and not selling when we're approaching our marketing, that can be a really useful way of overcoming that block and that fear of talking about ourselves. And finally, we talked about not knowing where to draw the line between giving away your secrets and helping people. Now, in general, in the concept of content marketing, which is the overarching term for this idea of doing blogs and articles and social media and all that kind of thing, we can draw a distinction between tailored advice, which is specific advice for somebody that solves their problem, and general advice, which would apply to a broad category of clients. Now, that's the distinction that we would apply to across all industries. But I think in the legal sector, we can go one step further. Within this general advice area, we still have a bit of a risk in that if we put general advice up and somebody relies on it, we could get ourselves into some dodgy territory. So when I think about what to write about in the law firm context, I like to go one step further and try and create marketing content which focuses on the business context. So we're taking if the middle section is the sort of work that we actually do for clients and get paid for, the middle circle represents the work which is we maybe aren't charging for. It's perhaps bits of advice that we're giving people in the course of business, borders on legal advice, but maybe not quite. We move outside of that circle and just talk about the business environment in which those clients are operating. So we're helping them understand their business. We're also demonstrating that we know about their business, and we're putting ourselves in a really good position to be able to help people. So that's where I would draw the line between giving away your secrets and helping people and showing willingness. So with those three barriers looked at, we've got the first one, which was what was the first one? Fear of growth. So we don't necessarily need to grow. We can look at creating better opportunities for ourselves. The second one is thinking about helping and not selling to people. And the third one is we now know where to draw the line between giving our secrets away and helping people with useful content. So the only barrier left is our own creativity, the ability to come up with good ideas about what to talk to people about. There's a common misconception which comes up time and time again, and that is that creativity is something that comes to us at birth. We are born creative. I am a creative person, and you're not a creative person. And I think it's nonsense, and it's a really damaging idea. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from the talk today, is that creativity is a process and a technique that can be learned just like anything else. Really, it just boils down to 4 key ideas. We define an audience. Who are we trying to reach with the idea we're trying to come up with? Secondly, what are their needs? What problems are they facing? What can we help them with? We then go through a process of generating ideas, but because we've gone through the first 2 steps, we now know what ideas we're trying to come up with. We're not staring at a blank sheet anymore. We've got specific problems aimed at a specific person around which to focus our efforts. And then finally, the bit that lawyers will tend to be really good at is evaluating the ideas, working out the problems with them, and then choosing the one which has the least risk and the most chance of being successful. So I'm just going to run through that process and share with you 1 or 2 tools for each step which can help you to meet the objectives of that stage. And the first one is defining the audience. So the technique we use when we work with clients for defining their audience is to create fictional characters which represent a group of clients and which we can use to test our ideas against and to try and get an understanding of people. Now they are fictional, but they help us get outside of our own heads. If we sit there trying to come up with ideas, we naturally have a tendency to think of things which meet our own needs or are attractive to us. And really we need to be putting ourselves to the side and thinking about the needs of a customer or a client. So we use this technique called the personas. We give background information, we talk about their professional life, we have a guess at the sorts of hobbies and interests they might be in case that gives us an insight into how we might reach them. We talk about their technical experience. Well, we design websites, so we talk about their technical experience so that we can pitch the technology at the right level. We look at websites they might use, and then we look at the kinds of needs and wants that person might have. And this is a really useful tool for understanding your customer and just getting agreement amongst a group of people about who you're targeting and what you might be needing. So the next step in the creative process is to identify needs. Now all of us who are working in a professional service will be talking to people on an everyday basis, and we really should have a good idea about what our clients' needs are and the kinds of problems they come up with. But it's very easy when you're going through your day-to-day work to listen to the things which directly impact on what you need to do now and ignoring the other things people are telling you about, which are things that they're worried about. Now those things that you're perhaps filtering out because we're busy are things that we could potentially build a marketing campaign around because they're things that we know somebody is interested in. So how do we capture those? Well, I think it's a really good practice to get into ideas, get into the habit of keeping a questions log. So that can be just a scrap of paper that you keep on your desk. It could be a whiteboard that you have up in your office where everybody in the team writes down questions that come up. You could have an email chain which you add to every time somebody comes up with a question. But it's just getting into a habit of every time you hear a client say something which is a problem, which isn't directly related to the matter you're working on with them, you just record it so that when you come to think up marketing ideas, you've got a list of things that you know at least one of your clients is bothered about. And if one of your clients is bothered about it, then there's a good chance that other similar clients will be too. So keep a questions log of everything. Now the other way that you can come up with identifying their needs is something like the design deck. So we developed the design deck as a way of mapping legal processes. And it's a series of cards. Each card has like a step you might take when dealing with a client matter. And in the space on it, you can write down the details of exactly what it is. So you can use a tool like that to map out the entire development of a matter from beginning to end. So from somebody first calling you up to it reaching a successful conclusion. With that process mapped out, you can then go through each step and say, okay, this is the piece of work that we have to do for someone. What is the client's concerns? What are they worried about? What other information should we be giving somebody around that element which will help them have a better experience of working with us? And that can be another source of great marketing ideas and content that you can produce. So we use our product, which is called Design Deck. You can just map it out with a flow diagram, or you can use post-it notes or what have you. But mapping the process and then looking at each step and thinking about the additional information that you might give somebody in that instance. So by this point, we know who we're targeting and we know some of their needs. So now we need to work out a way of packaging up the information in a way that's going to be attractive and useful to them. And when it comes to generating ideas, if you research into this, you'll find lots and lots of complicated techniques and difficult and potentially difficult exercises for generating ideas. And I'm a firm believer that it doesn't need to be that complicated. The single best way of generating ideas is just to play a numbers game with traditional brainstorming. And that is a case of getting your team together around a table or against a blank wall and just going for numbers. And you sit down and you write down as many different ideas as you can. And just before you start, pick a number, 200 ideas. And you write them all down and you stick them on the wall. And it doesn't matter if they're silly or ridiculous or irrelevant. But you writing one thing down could lead to your colleague writing something else, and then another colleague coming up with an idea which is useful and can end up being the right product. So you're not trying to get every single idea being a good idea. You're trying to spark the thought processes in your colleagues, in yourself, and in colleagues. So it seems simple, but brainstorming is really the best, cheapest, easiest way to get involved with coming up with ideas. The key is the first two steps where we've defined what idea we're trying to come up with. So we're not staring at a blank page of just trying to come up with ideas at random. We're focusing our efforts around some specific goals. That's great in teams. If you find yourself on your own brainstorming, it's a great thing to be able to do, when you're on a train or travelling, if you've not got internet connection, your emails aren't working. It's the sort of thing you can do on the back of an envelope or on a scrap of paper, and it can be a really valuable use of time. So in that instance, I'd look at doing mind mapping. You've probably all experienced it before. You put the topic in the middle. So in the middle, you'd have your audience type and the problem you're trying to solve. And then off it, you put your ideas as they come up. And you use each idea then to spark more ideas. Now the key is to get yourself into a discipline of always adding two things to every branch. So if you put something down, you say, right, I'm going to put two more ideas off that. So you're always using each idea to spark the next one and the next one and the next one, and it grows out. And it's probably just the best to set yourself a time limit. I'm going to keep adding two things to every branch for half an hour, or whatever time you've got available. And that's a great way of coming up with ideas. as I say, I'm really keen that we keep idea generation really simple. So I try not to use too many complicated techniques. If you're interested in finding some more interesting techniques, there's a really good book called Thinker Toys, and it has about 100 different ways of generating ideas. So if you get bored of doing brainstorming or doing mind maps, and you just want to try something different to get you through a mental block, that's a really good resource, and I really recommend looking it up. They've actually got, he actually has a website which has quite a lot of the content freely available anyway, but it's still a useful thing to have. Even in our office, we refer to it fairly regularly. So the final step is we've generated our 200 ideas. Now we want to try and evaluate those to decide which of those 200 we're going to actually take forward into to become a marketing campaign. Now the key here, as lawyers, you won't have any trouble with doing the evaluation, finding the problems with the ideas. The key is to give yourself a chance to be more methodical about how you make those decisions. So not just dismissing them on gut feeling, but really working out which ones are the best for the different customer needs that you've identified. So we do that with the help of an ideas and needs matrix. Obviously, you can discard the obviously silly ideas first. So you wouldn't necessarily put all 200 on a grid like this. You perhaps choose the top 50, put those down the side, then put the needs of your customers along the top, and just simply score each idea against each customer. And then at the end, total it up, and then you'll get an idea of which one might be the best idea to take forward. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the creative process. I thought it might be good to just look at an example. So this is from a US firm, the name of which I can't remember. But they came up with this idea for gathering all the information about shale gas fracking. And they put it into an app. There is, apart from a small summary of the regulation and legislation around this topic, all the rest of the content is about the industry and the general business context in which that practice is taking place. It has maps of all the shale gas drilling sites in the US. It has information about, so there's a map for the US, and then for most countries in the world there's a list of drilling sites. I just think it's a really fantastic way of demonstrating that they are engaged and knowledgeable about this specific issue without having to produce lots of legal related content. They've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about the needs of customers in that area. They've obviously decided that people with issues around fracking are profitable and attractive to them, so they've focused on that subsection of their client base, despite the fact that they're a big general practice commercial law firm. So I thought that was an interesting one to look at. So at this point, it's good to think about what the unique opportunities are for Avrio. And because you're a network of non-competing law firms with specialism in your own jurisdictions, there's a real opportunity for sharing ideas. If one person in the room comes up with a great idea that works in their country and they can share it with everybody else, there's nothing stopping people using that idea and building on it and adapting it for their own country. So you've got 40 firms, is it now? So if everybody comes up with 40 ideas, you've got and has tested them, you've got a real opportunity for doing things which somebody else has already proved to have worked. So I think that's something you can really think about when I think you've got a business development forum after this. So sharing your ideas about how you're targeting small groups of people and attracting profitable clients is going to be a really valuable use of your membership of Avrio. So in summary, the key takeaways from today: decide what you want. Maybe it's growth and money and building a bigger firm and having more people, but don't discount other opportunities there are that marketing can deliver, like increasing the quality of the clients, increasing your enjoyment of your work by getting clients who give you the kind of work that you like doing, and those kinds of things. Commit to being helpful in your marketing. Don't sell yourself. Think about ways of helping other people. and by extension, people that puts you in shows you in a positive light, demonstrates your expertise, and sells yourself in a more subtle way, which doesn't require you to be a great salesperson. Focus on the business context instead of writing technical legal documents. Use a process and refine the process so that every time you need to come up with an idea, you know where to go. Okay, I'm going to make a persona, then I'm going to map out my process, then I'm going to do some brainstorming, and then I'm going to evaluate the ideas. It takes away the problem of having a blank page to stare at. You know the steps that you're going to take to come up with a new idea. And finally, it's like any skill in life and anything that's worth having, just practice and practice and practice until you get it better. So that brings me to the end of the speech.